Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again as we continue our march through time with our Helloween episode. This, their fifth album, Chameleon. Boy, is this a different one, going back to 1993. But before we get to Helloween, Chris, my friend, how are you?
I'm good. I'm a little worried that you're a witch, but other than that,
why is that?
Well, we'll talk about it at the end, but we'll pique people's curiosity unless you're part of the online or the video group chat. Then you probably have an idea of what I'm referring to, but we'll reveal that later towards the end. Otherwise, everything's good. I guess being that we're, a mere day before Halloween, it's timely to be friends with a witch.
I don't know how I pulled this off, but I managed to do something semi-miraculous. And if you want to find out what that is, you'll have to wait until we get to the end of the episode. But for now, I'll ask you what I always ask, which is, have you heard anything new and interesting this week? A lot has come out in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm finally starting to kind of catch up on some stuff. I gave the new Theocracy album a listen to, which I talked about a bit on our group chat yesterday. Really enjoyed it. I thought it was very good. I listened to the new Temperance album, which I thought was quite good. Ronnie Atkins' new solo album. We'll talk a bit about him towards the end as well. All good stuff. It was good to kind of get back into the swing of listening to some metal releases. I actually didn't really listen to Chameleon at all this week because I listened to it a bunch of times the previous couple of weeks heading into this week, and I felt pretty comfortable with it, so I was able to kind of focus in on some of this other stuff. I also gave our friend Rich's band Taliesin, which I went out of my way to learn how to pronounce correctly, and then he told me that they pronounce it incorrectly, so I'm going to go with his. I'm going to go with his incorrect pronunciation. They released an album called Disciple. I believe it came out last month. It's really good. I was really impressed. I'm going to go back and give this one another listen. But I will say that the song, of all the songs I heard today, the one that really stuck out to me was a song called Godless from Ronnie Atkins' Trinity album. So I would recommend you guys go and give that a listen. It was the longest track on the album, but I really liked it. It was just really melodic and this is I guess this is Ronnie's third solo album in, it feels as if it's his third album in as many years. But I really, I just enjoy hearing his voice. It's a little bit different from, what you're used to with Pretty Maids. It's a little bit more of that, Frontiers kind of sound, a little bit more of just that melodic.
I think that's become an adjective lately.
Yeah, it's kind of like an AOR kind of deal, but I really liked it. So, got some more on the docket, but I feel pretty good about catching up on stuff. So yeah, that was pretty much where I'm at. And also, I had mentioned to you earlier that Lily from Master Sword. I don't believe that the band's kind of on hiatus right now. She's kind of created her own kind of solo name and she goes by Lily Andromeda now, and she's done a couple of covers online, and they dropped one of Sweet True Lies, which is a cover of Beast in Black, a band we've spoken at length about, and I was really impressed with the job she did on here. I'm a really big fan of her vocals. I think that she has a very distinct sound that I don't think is similar to any other vocalist that I've heard. She worked with Jason Ashcraft on this, and previously they had done a cover together of Helloween's "The Invisible Man," which was a song that was on the Keeper of the Seven Keys, The Legacy album, and I thought that was really cool as well. But I really enjoyed the Beast in Black cover, so that was really cool. I believe Jason Ashcraft is from Hellion Prime and the Planeswalker project that I think we discussed or spoke of from last year. So cool stuff. I recommend checking it out if you haven't.
Yeah, lots of good stuff there. I've got a couple of things myself. Actually, both female-fronted bands that I think one I know you're aware of. The other one maybe not so much. After what seemed like quite a bit of a hiatus, Exit Eden is back with a new single called "Run!" featuring Marco Haitala, formerly of Nightwish. Clementine from Visions of Atlantis does the bulk of the lead vocals on this track, and I have to say, if you closed your eyes, you would kind of think this is like, I don't know, a Net era Nightwish or something like that. It's a really good track from an era, arguably my favorite era of the band, Nightwish. Definitely something to keep an eye out on. And so even though they're down a singer now, I have a feeling this album could be really, really good. And it sounds like there's a lot of inspiration and maybe the time off for everyone, kind of re-energize them. And what's interesting is, if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is their first original song that they've released.
Yeah. I had mentioned them last week, and I think it was the day after they released this single. And I'd mentioned Amanda Somerville was no longer with the band, and I don't know if they're going to have like a guest vocalist on all the songs as like the guest fourth vocalist. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but it was cool. Like having Marco in there was such a great call. And yeah, it's their first original song because that first album was all covers. So, I'm not sure if, the new album is supposed to be a mix of original stuff and covers or all original. I guess we'll find out, but, I'm excited to hear it because I really did enjoy that first one. And I thought this single showed a lot of promise. So good stuff.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And in the same type of vein, in terms of like style, there's a band out of Italy that released an album back in 2023. The band is Elegy of Madness. The album is Invisible World. It was their fourth release, but they just came out with their fifth album entitled 11 or XI using Roman numerals. And although I don't think it was anything groundbreaking, I thought it was just a really enjoyable listen. I think even more so than myself, I think you will really appreciate this band just knowing your affinity for that symphonic metal style. This has you written all over it. So I would strongly suggest you check out at least a couple of singles off the album.
Yeah, I actually have the single Broken Soul on a playlist that I put out a little while ago, but I have to hear the rest of the album. That's the only thing I've heard from that album.
Just a really a solid effort from them, I would say. I think it's something I think you'll particularly enjoy. But with all that new music and all the good stuff that's been coming out, we go back to 1993 and we go back to a Helloween album, which I still think is jarring to the listener in many ways, because this is 5 or 6 years after Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1 and Part 2. Arguably the two most influential power metal albums of all time. And yeah, you can throw some early Blind Guardian into the mix. Hell, if you wanted to throw Power Slave into the mix by Iron Maiden, I don't think people would argue. But for all intents and purposes, that whole power/speed metal thing really came into its own in 87 and 88. And here we are just 5 or 6 years later, and Helloween releases an album which is for all intents and purposes completely different than anything they'd ever done. And I would argue further away from Pink Bubbles than Pink Bubble was Keeper, if that makes sense. Like, this is just so far off the beaten path that it does not get a lot of love from hardcore Helloween fans. It never really caught on in the mainstream, although I think that there's some mainstream appeal here. It's just an oddity, especially when you consider that a mere year later, Master of the Rings would come out and blow everybody's faces off with just a return to form. And I obviously look forward to chatting with you about that in the future. But, I make no bones about it. This was an album that I have struggled with for 25 years. And although I've listened to it plenty of times, I never got into it. And I was kind of excited when you chose it this week because it gave me, or dare I say, forced me to listen to the album multiple times. No excuses, no skipping tracks, just play it straight through. And it is a long album. This album is 71 minutes or so before you even get to 7 or 8 bonus tracks. So a lot of meat on the bone here, as they say. This was quite the interesting week for me, I have to say.
You said a mouthful. Yeah. I think I've always kind of been a little bit soft on this album. And I guess what I mean by that is just that I haven't been as harsh in criticism as much as others have been. And I think the reason for that, and I'll probably echo some of the things that I said when we talked about Pink Bubbles Go Ape, but, this comes at a time where I was really, really hungry for more Helloween. At the time, we had our Keeper albums, we had our Walls of Jericho, and then we had, Master of the Rings and Time of the Oath, and probably better than Raw at that point. Maybe not. Probably at that point. And so I was just, the fact that there were this, another 2 albums out there, I didn't really give it a shit if they were not the same, as anything else. Like, I just wanted to hear more from this band. And so I ordered both albums at the same time. And this was definitely a totally different experience. Pink Bubbles Go Ape was almost like Keeper Light, whereas this was like, I think this is like I had made a comment during our Monkeys Justice episode that like it felt like a 4-person solo album, and I think I literally compared it to this album, which was a little bit of me dropping a hint that we would be covering it in the near future. But this really is just 3 guys from Helloween writing 4 songs each, and like I don't know that they had much to do with one another in the recording process, and they went on tour after this, and then they canned Kisk and Ingo immediately after the tour. And I think it was just such a commercial and critical flop that they just knew it was time to just hit the reset button. But man, this is, I have to say, I think this is the most fascinating Helloween album of all time. Whether that's for good or bad reasons, I guess depends on the person, but at least to me, I just, every song is, there's not 2 songs that sound remotely similar on this album, even the ones that were penned by the same composer.
Yes. And in fact, it's a really interesting exercise if you kind of guess who wrote the songs, because there's certain songs where you can pretty much guarantee you can guess correctly. And there was 1 or 2 that I went back and I guessed wrong, and I was convinced somebody else wrote the song, and I was surprised to see who actually penned it. But, one of the things that we don't often talk about is cover art. And this cover art for this album is something we have to just mention before we get into the actual album. It is basically a white backdrop with 4 different streaks of colors, and then in the top right, the classic Helloween logo. I mean, it is just a weird album cover for what can otherwise be described as a weird album, and it almost speaks to the lack of cohesion because of the cover, where it's just these 4 parallel lines, but they look nothing alike because of the stark contrast in color.
Yeah, the green streak I think is for the B-sides that Marcus got to write, and the white just is Ingo not writing anything as per usual. But yeah, it's odd. It's the same lineup as Pink Bubbles. Roland Grappo, Michael Wykath on guitar, Michael Kisk on vocals, Marcus Grosskopf on bass, and Ingo Schwichtenberg on drums. At that point in time, I think that might have been the longest the longest running Helloween personnel, or if not tied with the Keeper era, which only lasted about 2 or 3 years. I mean, they're basically equal in length, but very different in critical acclaim. But I can't even imagine what it would have been like to be a fan of this band at the time, and kind of hoping that the band would do something a little bit more dynamic after Pink Bubbles kind of fell a little bit flat, and they went the opposite direction. Like, this is like an almost like an art art project from just a bunch of guys that had seemingly had no interest in working with one another and just wanted to bang out this album. I think that there was some desire to try and make it commercial, which it's kind of funny. It reminds me a little bit of Fight for the Rock by Savatage, where like they tried to be commercial and it ended up being like the worst received album in the Savatage catalog, and this is to me is the worst received album in the Helloween catalog, although I think that there's a lot of good in here. It's just sometimes it's almost like you have to close your eyes and pretend you're listening to a Kiss, Whitecath, or Roland Grappo solo album that Kiss just happens to be the singer for on the entire thing. But there is no flow. The only reason there's a flow on this album to me is because I've heard it so many times I just know what's supposed to come next. But man, like the songs are just so different from one another. Like,
and I think that's wild. The problem. It's jarring to the listener if you've never heard it before. And unfortunately, even knowing the album as well as I do, there's still no continuity between this stuff. It's like they threw stuff against the wall to see how it would stick. And unfortunately, some of these songs stick and other ones, are definitely skippable, especially in the pantheon of their catalog where there's so many great classic songs. But without further ado, I think we should just kind of get into it because each song has such charm, for good or for bad. It's worth noting. And the first song, ironically called First Time, I would argue is the most classic sounding Helloween song on the album. And it just and I'm not saying that this song would have been on Keeper 2, but there's an argument to be made that this song could have possibly been on Pink Bubbles or something like that. And it's one of the probably 3 hardest rocking tunes on the album. And just from the second that this thing starts that this is written by Whitecath, because it has a certain cadence to it and a certain catchiness, I guess, that is just, Whitecath through and through. I always found this to be an enjoyable tune, although admittedly, because it was enjoyable at the time, I think I don't enjoy it as much as I used to, only because I probably played it more than any other song on the album. So definitely not my song of the week at this point, but there's this simple riff which kind of permeates the entire song, and I do enjoy how the bass lines kind of play off of it. That being said, the wheels come off the wagon right after this. So if you're looking for this kind of a sound throughout, you're going to be sorely disappointed as you listen to this album.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the first time, pun intended, I guess, the first time I listened to this album and just was like, whoa, like what happened here? It's weird the way that even just the tracks are laid out. There's like this big like Wyke block in the middle. Like it's interesting. I always really liked this song a lot. I think it's one of the most underrated Helloween songs. And I think one of the reasons why is because it's on this album. I think that maybe if it was on a Pink Bubbles Go Ape, it might have received a little bit more love, a la the Chance or Mankind or what have you. I agree with you. I don't know that it would have fit as a Keeper song, but maybe a Keeper B-side, like Livin' Ain't No Crime, which was kind of this really, again, another song I think was penned by Wyke, just kind of had like almost too much of an upbeat nature to it. This one, the lyrics are really cheesy. I think it literally is just a song about trying to convince a girl to lose her virginity to the guy. I'm hoping Mikey didn't write it, based on a personal experience. But I really like it. That riff to me is one of my favorite Helloween riffs of all time. I'll also say that, like, up until this point, if we're gonna say one nice thing about this album, it's the best production, the best sounding Helloween album up to this point, because I don't think anyone would argue that the first 4 albums were the best sounding records ever produced.
So I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I think it's clear in the sense that sonically it's clear, it's louder, it's better produced, but I actually think the mix itself is pretty poor, and I'm going to tell you why. Unlike the other albums, which obviously don't sound as well produced, this production just sounds flat to me. The entire album sounds a little flat, and I think that it lacks the punch of the low end, which kind of drove some of those other classic songs, which is really the double bass drum, that even the low crunch of the guitars is just not really anywhere to be found on here. And maybe it's part of the reason why the songs are so different, but I actually don't love the mix. I don't mind the production. I just don't like the mix.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I think that might just be more of a function of them going for a more commercial sound, or the fact that it was 1993. I don't know. I guess I could kind of understand that. I feel like Pink Bubbles at least sounded a little bit muddier to me.
Okay,
and
that's fair.
I think this has more clarity, although, maybe you're right, like it's not mixed as well, but I think overall, maybe from a mastering standpoint, it just has, I think it just sounds clearer than the previous albums did. The Keeper albums and Walls of Jericho especially have a very 80s recording kind of vibe to them, which some people don't really like. There's some remixed songs from that era that like really show how differently those songs could have sounded. If you check out the Treasure Chest greatest hits set, they did. I don't know if the plan was originally to like remix everything, and then they did a few, and it became too time consuming. But they did remixes of Dr. Steen and Keeper of the Seven Keys, and a few tracks from Walls of Jericho, and they sound incredible.
Oh, totally! It's like new life on those songs.
Yeah. So, but anyway, getting back to Chameleon, I think I'm going to make this my song of the week. In all honesty, I just really like it that much. I would have, if you were going to pick it, I would have probably chosen something else just to be a little bit different. But since you didn't, I'll go with this one. I agree with you. It's the most classic Helloween sounding song on this album. It definitely is a wikey tune, and I think it just is a real rocker. And I would lose my shit if they played this song live, like just busted it out. I mean, I don't know that there's a ton of songs on this album I'd really want to hear live. I mean, 4 of them are pretty much never going to be played live because they were written by Roland, and he's not part of that group at this point. So yeah, like of the remaining options, this might be the only one I'd really want to hear played live, but I would lose my mind. So let's give it a quick listen, and we'll move on to Michael Kisk's first, a song that he gave to this album. So here's First Time.
Can I watch you rock and know which one to choose? I'm no liar. I can take you down and you got nothing to lose. I'll know any better location, and I hope that's the end of the day. Don't you for the first time, no longer with me anyway. I can't wait forever, baby. Open me your door. I just want your love, and if you cannot give me more.
So that brings us to track 2, When the Sinner, which is this completely different, right? It's slower, it's poppier, it has a real like radio rock vibe. And I gotta be honest, my wife pointed something out to me in the car, which I would have never thought about had she not brought it up. But when this song came on, she's like, it sounds like Aerosmith. And you know what? She's not incredibly wrong. I actually think she's right. And I never noticed it before. It's not a bad song in full candor. It's actually not bad at all. It's just not Helloween. And I mean, I could say that a lot about this album. I won't say it each and every time, but I did find it interesting that it was released as the first single for the album. It actually came out about 10 days before the album was released on May 31st of 1993. I love the layered vocals in places, and it just has this like really catchy chorus, but it's jarring when you start hearing saxophones and piano and brass instruments in a Helloween song. I can't imagine being in Germany and like kind of listening to the radio and then hearing this song and be like, what the hell is this? But that's what happened, and that's When the Sinner. But like all in all, not bad.
Yeah, this is Michael Kiske. This is like, I think for the first time, him writing music that he wanted to write that wasn't, that would be put in that heavy metal box. I think he tried to write songs that fit into that box for Pink Bubbles Go Ape and Keeper 2. I don't think he wrote any of the songs on Keeper 1, if memory serves, but he, to my understanding, like, he took care of all the orchestrations on his tracks, and like, he really went all out. And this song kind of shows that. It's such an odd song to listen to right after First Time, because it's just like this, like, production. It's like, there's like some cool guitar work though during the solos. There's a really fun music video that they made that kind of is like a riff on their legal dispute with Noise Records, which the whole story behind that was that they were kind of landlocked, so to speak, with these two albums, Pink Bubbles and Chameleon. They were never released in the US because they were signed on to EMI Records, which, for those who know, that was the record label the Beatles were on. And as far as I know, these albums didn't come out outside of Europe and Japan until much later. I certainly had to import both of them in order to listen to them. But this is a cool song. There's like a 45-second like saxophone solo to end the song, which is completely out of place and weird. But then again, it almost makes sense in the grand scheme of this entire album, where nothing makes any sense anyway. So why not have a 40-second saxophone solo? Like, at this point, who cares? Like, they were just throwing whatever against the wall, and not a lot stuck. But I mean, I don't know. I've listened to this album so many times over the years that like nothing really surprises me anymore. But like, the first time I heard it, I thought it was so just so offbeat and weird.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think it's on full display here because this is the first track on the album where they do something like this, but it's not the last. We get to track 3 though, I Don't Want to Cry No More, which is the second single from the album. And this is a Roland Grappo song that, quite frankly, it's Roland from the second this song kicks off. And I say that because the guitar intro is just very like Grand Funk Railroad, that whole type of sound, which obviously was a big influence for him. And it's the first of many ballads on this album, arguably the best on the album, in my opinion. But for whatever reason, it's just not in the vein of like the classic Helloween ballads. So as a result, it's still jarring in its own right, even though it's certainly digestible. In many ways, it's just a simple folk rock tune, but the strings that they use, the orchestration, gives it a really polished feel, but almost too polished. And I don't love the track. I think the intro's cool, but it loses me somewhere in the middle because it's just, this is a far cry from a tale that wasn't right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know I don't know. I don't think it's that far of a cry. Like I think it's a really good power ballad. I really like the acoustic guitar solo towards, the back end of the song, and then it kicks back into the electric. Like I think it's a really nice song. It was Roland had written it for his brother who had passed away. And that's basically what the song is about. I agree 100%. It's just very Roland. It definitely has a Grand Funk Railroad vibe on that intro. It's just I don't know. It's like you go from like this hard rocker to like a weird like mid-tempo kind of like radio rock song, and now we're on the third track and we're already kind of onto like the a power ballad, and there's going to be like, I think each of the three songwriters each have their own kind of ballad type song on this album. There are a lot of kind of slower parts. I always really kind of like this song. I think it's really it's a nice song. And again, like I'm trying to look at these songs outside of like them being Helloween songs and just kind of songs in and of themselves, and a different way of experiencing a lot of these songs is if you go take a look, you can find Michael Kiske released a solo album called Past in Different Ways, where he re-recorded most of, if not all of the songs he wrote for Helloween, including When the Sinner. And Master Plan released an album of all of the songs Roland wrote when he was with Helloween, minus one of them, which we'll get to next. But this was a bonus track that Roland sang the vocals on, which is a really cool version of the song. I thought that it made sense because being that it was such a song that was close to Roland's heart, that he would sing it instead of Rick. But yeah, I think this is a good tune. It's just, again, it just doesn't really feel like a Helloween song, but I think in and of itself, I think it's a pretty nice tune.
Well, before Rabbit didn't come easy, there was Crazy Cat. So that's the fourth track here. And while I knew Roland had penned I Don't Want to Cry No More, this was a bit of a surprise to me because Crazy Cat doesn't sound like classic Roland to me. This is more like upbeat with scat and jazz elements. Yes, scat and jazz elements. And as a result, it always reminds me of like a show tune, like something you would kind of see on Broadway with like jazz hands and like the short little cane, the magician's cane and all that stuff. That said, buried in all that like David Lee Roth top hat showman thing, there's some really good guitar work on this album. And if you close your eyes and you just forget who you're listening to, I think Crazy Cat is actually like a decent experimental hard rock tune somewhere. I mean, that's kind of the way I would describe this. Close your eyes, listen to it, pretend you don't know who's playing it, and it's actually semi-enjoyable.
This was the one song that Master Plan didn't cover on their Punk Kings album, which I was disappointed because I think it would have been fun to hear.
It's too offbeat.
Yeah, it would have been funny to hear a modern take of it. I love this song.
Hearing Rick Altsey sing Crazy Cat, I mean...
Come on. I mean, the fact that this song just is one of the most un-Helloween songs I've ever heard because of just how, like, the orchestrations and the jazziness of it is so over the top, like you said. This song is a freaking blast. And I got to share the video. Somebody made a video... and it's on YouTube of an actual cat just walking through town causing problems set to this song. It's not
like Heathcliff.
But a real cat. It's really funny. So I'll have to share that. If you want to hear just this is the shortest song on the album. You're in and out in 3.5 minutes. But I mean, if you've never heard this album, at least do yourself a favor and listen to this song and just be like, how the hell did they put a Helloween logo on this thing? Because it's just so. I mean, B-side, sure, but like it's
this
so
is an album proper.
Yeah, I mean, they were going for an animal thing. They had Heavy Metal Hamsters on the last one, and now we have Crazy Cat on this one. Rabbits didn't come easy later on, but just a weird first 4 tracks, and then Wyke just takes the reins for the next 3 songs. But I think Crazy Cat is a blast, and I remember even really liking it as a kid when I first heard the album. Just really, really out there.
Well, yeah, and I would argue that the next 3 Wyke songs are like 3 of the most bizarre tracks that he's ever penned, and we start with Giants. Give me your thoughts on this, because I actually have some interesting reaction to this, having heard it so many times this week.
Yeah, I've always been a Giants fan, never a Jets fan. I think this was a song that I don't think I liked that much at first, but over the years, I actually really, really like it a lot. I think that it's one of the more Helloween-ish songs, at least of like the Michael Kiske era. They played this live with Andy Darris for a short time at the beginning of the Master of the Rings tour, and I would urge you to kind of seek that out on YouTube, because it's pretty cool to hear Andy sing it. I take back what I said before. This is another song I think that would be really cool to hear the band perform live, especially now that Kiske is back in the fold. But this song, it's a little bit soft, but it still feels like a heavy metal song, and I don't know. I think it's a pretty complex power metal song, but I think it's quite good. There's the sound effects and kind of like the orchestrations and stuff that they use in the middle of the song are really dramatic, almost like spacey in ways. But you have your guitar solos, and I don't know. I think I used to think this song didn't need to be as long as it was, but it doesn't really bother me. I think this is one of the better tracks on the album, and I think this is, in my opinion, this might be Wyke's worst outing as a songwriter for Helloween in the macro sense on this album. But I think this song and First Time are definitely the 2 bright spots for him on this album. So I'm very curious to hear what you have to say.
I never paid this song any mind as a kid. And so going back, I knew First Time I was going to enjoy it for what it was. I didn't think I was going to enjoy Giants because it just never resonated with me as a kid. This was much better than I remembered it. Much better than I remembered it. And even though it's more glam than jazz, there's some good guitar solos. I think the verses are amongst the best on the album, and Kiske's vocals are just outstanding on this track. It actually has a bit of a Mankind vibe to me. Not that Wyckoff had anything to do with that. I don't think he wrote Mankind, did he?
That was Roland.
Yeah, it was Roland. That's what I thought. But it still has that kind of grandiose build that Mankind has, and it has that kind of a feel to it. That spacey section you mentioned, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with that particular song, and that's why I didn't make it my song of the week. But at the same time, if I ever heard this song live today, I'd completely mark out. I'd love it. It was in contention for song of the week. It was my runner-up to what I ultimately chose.
Nice, yeah.
I wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have said that 6 months ago or 16 years ago. So that's a testament to listening to this album again.
I like your comparison to Mankind. I think that's a pretty apt comparison. This, I think, feels a little bit more dramatic, but I definitely think there's some parallels there. So yeah, really cool tune. The next one is interesting. This was another one of the singles, and this is another Wyke song called Windmill, and this is definitely a ballad. The first time I heard it, I thought that Helloween wrote a country song. I really thought that, like, there is something very country about this song. It is really kind of surprising to me, this and the following track, that Wyke wrote these 2 songs for this album, because they're 2 of the most wikey like songs I've ever heard. I don't necessarily dislike Windmill, but I don't know that I really love it that much either. It's just an oddball tune. It's probably my least favorite of the softer tunes on this album, but it definitely sounds like it could have had some sort of radio potential or whatever. I don't know, not for metal fans, but I don't know. It was.
You can see why they released it as the third single, but that being said, I find it boring, a little weird, and very cheesy. And so I've always found this to be a very skippable tune. I think the highlight are those piano notes in the beginning, and then unfortunately it just gets worse after that. And I'd argue it's maybe Whitecat's worst song out of the entire discography. I don't know that there's anything worse than this. And I say that because it's fine, but it's repetitive and it just goes on too long. That all being said, it's better than I remember it. So I want to be clear. I hated this song. It's okay. I just don't like it. So if it was a 1.5, it's now a 3, right? So I want to be clear. I don't like the song, but it's better than I remembered it. So I'll give credit for what credit is due.
Yeah, it's interesting because I believe there was a compilation. It might have only come out in Japan. And I think this was the only song from Chameleon that made it onto the compilation. Like, it's interesting to me. Like I always look forward to seeing where the tracks from Pink Bubbles and Chameleon end up landing on like a, career retrospective type album, like a 2-disc set. I remember the Pumpkin Box had one of the discs was literally just from Pink Bubbles, Chameleon, and then a handful of tracks from the Live in the UK live album. So there was a decent amount of material from Chameleon on that compilation. I remember I think it was like First Time, and then all of the singles, the 3 or 4 singles that were the 4 singles that were on the album. Windmill and Step Out of Hell had kind of interchangeable singles. I believe one came out in Japan and one came out in Europe, but they had the same B-sides. It was just a different A-side depending on where your region was. But yeah, I mean, it's an okay song. I don't know that I've ever talked to anybody that said that they really like it, but it's fine. I prefer I Don't Want to Cry No More, though, as far as like a softer tune goes. But like I always say, back in high school when I was really into like these ballad, kind of power ballad type songs, even then, like this really, I don't remember this really doing a whole lot for me. But it's fine. It's again, it's just another weird track on a weird album.
And it continues with Revolution Now, which is this quirky, funky epic of a tune. It comes in at over 8 minutes. Does this song remind you of anything, the main riff? Because
it's an interesting.
Every time I hear this song, I think of something, and I can't unhear it because it was so pronounced and prominent to me. So I'll let that marinate for a second. I'll just kind of talk a little bit more about this song. I think the verses are a little pedestrian, and I don't like the chorus. So right off the bat, not my favorite song. I think there's this little interesting pre-chorus bit where they have these keys in the background, which is kind of like adds a little flavor to what's otherwise kind of a long and boring song. I give credit though, it does pick up speed a little bit, so I think that's good. During the bridge, there's this awesome guitar, like acoustic guitar tone. My issue with the song though is more than anything, I think that if they chopped 3 minutes off of it, it would be a better, tighter little song. But overall, again, not my favorite on the album by any means. But it does remind me of something. Can you guess what it is?
I have no idea. So please tell me.
Think Come Together by the Beatles.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And it just permeates like 90% of this song and like that real low end sound. So that's cool, but I'd rather just hear the Beatles do it. So
there was a time that and it might still be that time, that I thought this was the worst Helloween song ever.
Really?
And the fact that it was written by my favorite Helloween songwriter is so odd. but I have to say, the last few times I listened to this song, I probably have liked it more than I've ever liked it in my life. And again, much like you said about Windmill, that's not saying a lot. And I think the chorus is what kills this song, because it's the verses are offbeat and weird. But if the chorus was better and tied it together, I think it would have been an overall better song. But the chorus just has kind of like this really like dreary and dark kind of vibe to it, and it kind of like really kills the vibe of the song. But like there's like a part where it gets acoustic in the middle, and they take a portion out of the song San Francisco from Scott McKenzie. Like it's a weird, another like arty kind of track. But I have to say, like, I definitely like it more than I ever have before, and I found myself, because again, like you had said earlier, like there were songs that you would just skip. This was always a skipper for me. Like I had no desire to ever go back and listen to this song, but when I actually forced myself to, it has its moments. It's repetitive. It's longer than it needs to be, and the chorus sucks. But like, you know, it's definitely the most what's the word I'm looking for? Daring, I guess, or just really just outside the box song that Wyke ever penned, in my opinion. It's, in all honesty, it still really kind of surprises me that he was the one behind this. I kind of would have guessed that it is Kisk, just because it was so off the metal reservation, so to speak, that it's really surprising to me that was Wyke, and then Wyke just rides off into the sunset after this track, because
he's like, I'm done, I'm out. No, I'm done with this.
It's Kisk and Roland the rest of the way.
And it's funny because I think the next track also has a country feel to it. So like you mentioned how, you know, some of the album has a country music feel. In the Night, to me, resonates country, especially with that introduction. And even though I Kisk wrote the song, but I always thought it sounded like a Roland tune. So this was one of the ones that's a bit of a surprise to me. It's actually pretty catchy. It's melodic. It's just not what you want from Helloween. If this had been on Kisk's solo album, I think I would have been like, yeah, it's a good song. It's not metal. It's not even hard rock, but it's perfect for like light FM radio or something like that. And it has this interesting guitar twang throughout the whole thing, which is just very different. I don't hate it. I actually think it's better than I remembered it, but it's just not a favorite of mine.
This, if you remember, I mean, Jesus, when was the last time you listened to Kisk's Readiness to Sacrifice solo album?
Probably 2005, but go on.
I feel like this would have fit right on
100%.
That album.
I agreed.
Because his first solo album, Instant Clarity, he definitely was making an attempt to reach the metal fans, and by having I think Kai Hansen and was it Steve Harris? It was one of the guys from Maiden helped out with that album to really get Kisk's solo career off the ground and get that going. But then when he did Readiness to Sacrifice a couple of years later, I think he was just kind of like, all right, I just want to make the album I want to make. And for him, I think it was just to make like a easy listening rock album. And I think that there's some freaking gems on that. That's another weird album where it's just Kisk writing, and it has songs that all don't sound like they go together. But sure. There's some cool stuff on there, and it was actually Adrian Smith. I'm sorry,
yes.
Not. So yeah, Adrian Smith and Kai Hansen did guitars on a good portion of that first Kisk solo album, but this song In the Night I think fits better with that second solo album. In all honesty, I always really liked it. I thought it had like a kind of just a punchy catchiness to it for kind of a softer. It's not a ballad, but it's definitely a soft rock kind of tune, and as a lot of tracks do on this album, it kind of like during the solo section, instead of getting like, you know, heavy and riffy, it kind of like gets kind of quiet and acoustic. But I always thought this was a pretty good tune. Again, like it's one of the lesser Halloweenish tunes on an album that is not not much of a Halloween album. But I agree with you. It's a pretty good little tune. I don't hate it. It was one of the songs I always kind of looked forward to hearing when I was younger, and would go back to listen to this album, especially after like hearing the last, like not really being a big fan of the last two tracks and kind of wanting the train to get back onto not the original rails, because it never really gets back on the original rails, but at least on some rails somewhere else.
Going somewhere at least, if nothing else.
Shout out to Nick with the train mission, but I guess that's really all that can be said about that song.
So it doesn't get more palatable, or if it does, the end of this album is kind of peculiar to me, and it starts with music, a slower tune that kind of picks up, but despite, I think my issue with music is that it actually has a bit of a dark and depressing feel to it, despite the fact that I don't think that that's what they were going for with this. The brass, again, here gives this song a really unique quality. Some fairly good soulful guitar playing throughout. It just drags a bit. And so like it's kind of a love-hate thing with this song. Where do you stand? I have a hard time articulating why this one is a bit of a drag for me, but it's just that ominous dark feeling that kind of permeates the sound.
I love this song.
Okay.
Love might be a strong word, but I really like it. I think that the Master Plan cover version of it might be closer to what maybe Roland was really kind of hoping for, and maybe has a little bit less of that kind of darkness to it that you're saying, because I totally agree with you. But I also think that once the chorus hits, it's just so it's so powerful. Like those chords, those like orchestrations and those chords, and then that keyboard sound that sounds like it came right off a Phil Collins record from the 80s, man. I just really like this song. It is long. It's a 7-minute track. I would argue it may not need to be that long, but there's a lot of good Roland solo guitar work on here, or guitar solo work, I should say. It's just, it never really picks up. It's just this really mid-tempo song, but I love like all the brass and stuff. It just really makes it feel so epic. And I actually really enjoy the end of this album. I think the last 4 tracks all have their own interesting kind of powerful vibe to them. I think it's the middle of the album is where the album really drags for me. But this is a really cool song, and something I didn't know until recently is that this and the following track, Step Out of Hell, both, written by Roland, were actually kind of pulled from songs that Roland had wrote when he was in the band Rampage. So I pulled up the tracks. I'd never heard them before. It was amazing to hear like the older originations of these two songs in a completely, early to mid 80s German hard rock, heavy metal kind of vibe. It's really fascinating. I definitely would urge you to check out both of those.
I have to check those out. I never knew they even existed.
The tracks are called, let's see. I think the Step Out of Hell comes from a track called Victims of Rock, which was from the I
think it was by the album by the same name, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was the title track. Is that possible?
Yes, I believe you are correct. I'm going to just pull this up so I don't sound like an idiot. The band only released 2 albums, and then their second album, Love Lights Up the Night, they had a song. I think it is that the name of that song. I gotta go back and check it out again on YouTube. It might not be, I can't remember the name of the tune exactly, but it's really just interesting. I think he went in a bluesier direction on this Helloween version, but again, I think it's really kind of a cool tune. It's one of my favorites on the album, and I really enjoyed the Master Plan version of it as well. I think Rick Altsey really does a hell of a job, like, because, Kiss vocals are so smooth, and like Rick does he sounds more like a Darius than a Kiss.
Yeah, he's got that soulful voice,
Yeah,
like
very,
almost sultry in a way.
Yeah, he's, like a step down from Bjorn Land. Yeah, I think it's a cool song, and it leads into a song that I think is a little bit more upbeat with "Step Out of Hell."
Step Out of Hell was probably the one song I forgot about on this album. Definitely more upbeat, and the verses remind me of something, but I just can't quite put my finger on what it is. But they use a lot of heavy synth sounds on this, and it almost reminds me of like mid-'80s Rush, the way that they use those synths, but it works. Not really my favorite chorus, but the rest of the song is pretty good, and I would say it's in my top half of songs on the album. Not my favorite, but there's elements of this song that are very good. I can see why you think the album finishes up strong, because I think that this song and definitely the next one are two of my favorites in the top half of this album.
Yeah, I think this is just this song has kind of a poppy quality to it. But after like just this number of slower or countryish or bluesish or weird tracks. This is like the first kind of hard-hitting track since Giants probably on the album, and it's not even that hard-hitting. But I think it's a fun track. I think it was good to put this towards the back of the album to just kind of remind you that the band is still a metal band. I don't know. I think this is a cool tune, and it was chosen to be a single. This was the one that was released in Japan, and Windmill was released in Europe. So
it had to be such a weird time to break out some of these songs live and then contrast it with like, all right, and now we're going to play Future World. I mean, like, what a weird time to be a band, because if you went to these shows, I just can't imagine a lot of those fans of the Keeper stuff gravitating towards much of this music. It had to just be some of the weirdest concerts you'd ever see. But that being said, we get to I Believe, which, to be completely honest with you, another song I never paid any mind to as a kid, and I knocked my socks off this week. Unquestionably my song of the week. I want to give it a listen, and then I'll kind of explain why I chose it. But here's I Believe by Helloween. So that's I Believe, and like I said, a clear song of the week for me this week. I don't know why I always disregarded this tune, but it is really good, if not great. It's heavy. I think it's the heaviest song on the album. I think Kiss sounds fantastic, and the riffs remind me of stuff you would have heard on Time of the Oath if it had that punch that I kind of talked about earlier. But you can see why this song, again, it's a real reminder that they did have it in them. I think that what was arguably most surprising about it was that it was a Michael Kiske song, because, for a guy who was kind of moving away from metal, this is about as metal as it gets. There's a bit of a weird instrumental section which reminds me of like space rock, like a band like Ozric Tentacles or something like that. But
Wow.
at the same time, it's really cool. And even the bridge is interesting despite like the doo-wop vocals. Like, I don't know, for some reason this song really popped for me this week and I never really paid it any mind, but I'm glad I did because of all the songs, this was the one that really hit for me. This was a home run.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This song is phenomenal. A song that I think I also disregarded for a long time, probably just because it's a 9+ minute song. It's the longest song on the album, and I don't know. I don't know what was. I don't know if I just didn't have the patience for it, but this is an amazing song. And if it wasn't for Longing existing, I think this would have made for the right last track on the album. It's epic. There's the part in the middle where it just kind of slows up, and it's almost like this contemplative part of the song, as contemplative as instrumental music can be. Just really cool. I think that it is surprising that like Michael Kiske wrote one of the most Halloweenish songs on this album that most people consider to be the most un-Halloweenish album there is. But I agree 100% with everything you said. I think the song is really, really good, and it really shows that like, you know, Kiske could write a killer tune. It's amazing that he didn't write any songs from the new Helloween, you know, reunion album, and I don't know if he had any, you know, say in any of it or helped with vocal lines or what, but I would love to see him write a new song and and perform it with the band, and that would be really cool because he's got some really good tunes. They're just, a lot of them are just a little weird, but like this one's really good. I think the guitar work is probably some of the best on the album, on this album, and then you know, like I said, it slows up in the middle, but then it builds back up to the end, and then just ends in this really grandiose fashion. And I don't know that Helloween ever did as much with just these, you know, like brass and orchestrations and just really like just over the top, like almost theatrical type stuff. Like this album has a lot of just stuff you don't typically hear on a power metal record. Just a lot of, you know, like, you know, just instruments that you wouldn't normally hear. It's really, really interesting. But I'm glad you chose this as your song of the week. I don't know that I would have guessed that, but
I wouldn't have. That's so I can't imagine you would have. Unfortunately, I think it should have ended there. And instead we have one more track just because why not end it with a ballad? And it starts with these acoustic guitars. Again, the song is Longing. It takes a while to get this thing going. And when it does, I think it's probably pretty decent because Kiske is really stealing the show on this one. But again, better served for his solo albums, in my opinion. I think the highlight are probably the choruses. Otherwise, it's fairly nondescript and just a kind of a bizarre way to end what's otherwise a weird album.
Oh man, I'm definitely not with you on that. Like this, yes, this is not a Helloween song by any stretch of the imagination, but man, you talk about the last Michael Kiske song on a Helloween record ever. Like, boy, what a way to go out. Like this is, if you've ever played this song on headphones and just jacked up the volume and listened to it, like I dare you not to get goosebumps. Like the orchestration, the way that it builds that heavy bass drum, that like this is an incredible song. It's not a Helloween song. I will be very clear when I say that. But man, I couldn't see this album ending any other way. Like this, to have I Believe in Longing, these two Kiske tracks just kind of act as a send off for him and Ingo in a lot of ways as well. But like, you know, I always said that this song was the Michael Kiske swan song with the band. My wildest dreams never expected him to be a part of the band again, you know, many years later. But man, this song is incredible. And there was some sort of live holiday concert or something that they did, I think in Europe, and they did a Kiske sang with an actual orchestra sang the song.
I would be like curious to hear.
Oh my God, it's incredible. This would have been my song of the week had you chosen first time. It's definitely as much of an opposite of that first track as you can imagine. But man, this song is incredible. I remember Pat being like singing this song's praises before I had ever even heard this album. He must have been a ballad guy too at the time, because he said you have to hear Your Turn on Pink Bubbles Go Ape and you have to hear Longing on Chameleon. And like, if you're just a fan of hearing Michael Kiske sing, like this song, it definitely would have fit. Those last two tracks on Readiness to Sacrifice, I think it actually says in the liner notes, these songs are meant to be listened to on good speakers or with headphones or something. And the two songs are Easy, which is kind of in the vein of this song, very similar, where it's just a very atmospheric and chill Michael Kiske fest, followed by Shadow Fights, which again is another very heavily orchestrated tune. This would have fit right along on that album. Absolutely. It makes no sense as a Helloween song, but at the same time, I freaking love it as the last track on Chameleon, and kind of really just tying a bow on the weirdest period of time that this band would experience. Definitely want to talk about all of the bonus material and stuff as when the album was re-released as an expanded edition. It came with a second disc with 8 more tracks. Helloween used to just churn out bonus material. The Japanese record labels must have loved them because there was just plenty of stuff. But before we go into that, I just want to point out, you were talking about like what the set list would have been at this time, and man, if you were a fan of the Keeper albums, you would not have enjoyed these shows, because they played 9 songs from Chameleon and 5 from Pink Bubbles Go Ape and 4 from the 2 Keeper albums, nothing from Walls of Jericho, and an instrumental B-side from the Chameleon time. But I mean,
and don't forget a Carl Perkins cover. So like it was a weird time.
Yeah, but they played Crazy Cat, they played Giants, they played I Believe. This is some shit I would really like to hear. Step Out of Hell, this is such a cool time. I have an old, really bad bootleg video of a show from this tour. I think it was recorded in Oslo, Norway. And like somebody in a balcony with an old camcorder. It looks like shit. It sounds like shit, but it's a Helloween bootleg from the Chameleon tour. So I ate it up. I forgot where I got it from, but I think it's probably on YouTube now. I'll try to dig it up, but it's just a fascinating time in the band's history. And to my understanding, like almost put an end to this band before they would pick up Andy Darris and Uli Kush in a year's time, release Master of the Rings, and just completely change the trajectory of the band.
Yeah, I it's amazing to me that Soul Survivor and Where the Rain Grows would be coming out a year after this. It is just night and day when you really think about it. I want you to give your score eventually based on just the album proper and not the bonus sides. But
absolutely.
But that being said, I think we'd be remiss not to speak about them like you mentioned. So let's kind of just go through these one by one in no particular order. The first, I Don't Care, You Don't Care. God, if how could these songs get weirder? But somehow they do. A really interesting guitar solo at the start. Has a bit of like an anthemic quality to it in a way, but the song itself is a miss for me. I think it sounds more like a Scorpions tune than it does a Helloween song. Decent verses, but just another odd Wyckoff tune. But I guess I agree. Shit happens. I don't know what's like, something about this one's a miss. I just don't particularly like it.
Yeah, it's just an okay song. I forgot that it was a Wyke song. It's so, again, a very unlike him kind of tune. I think the lyrics are funny to me because it's almost like I wonder if it has something to do with just this whole recording session. It's like, I don't care, you don't care,
Shit
we
happens.
don't care, shit happens.
Yeah.
Like, let's move on. So yeah, it's got a little bit of a kind of a bluesy flavor to it. But yeah, it's fine. There was a time where like I was just obsessed with, again, hearing everything there was to hear, and I remember going on eBay and getting a collection of all these B-sides and hearing them for the first time, because I don't know that, they weren't released in the US until they made that expanded edition of all the albums, and they released every, bonus track, B-side, etc. I don't know that there's really anything that's really that great of any of these B-sides. They're all kind of middle of the road songs. But it's interesting. It's just something a little bit different, as Helloween B-sides do tend to be. Even on the more Helloween-esque albums, they tend to be a little bit more interesting, like, Roland singing a Grand Funk Railroad cover, as we will talk about on the next album.
Yeah, you're right. What's interesting is I thought I had heard all the B-sides, but I heard a new one this week for the first time. I had never heard Oriental Journey. I didn't have it, didn't realize it existed. For some reason, it just kind of escaped me, and it's an instrumental tune. But what's fascinating is that if you go on Helloween's YouTube page, the official YouTube page, Oriental Journey is on there, but it only has 3,400 hits. So it's like a forgotten tune, even by the Helloween fans. I don't really have anything to say other than it just highlights Roland's guitar playing in Whitecath 2 for basically 5.5 minutes. So, an interesting tune. I was just happy that I finally heard it after all of these years.
Yeah, and they would play it live. I don't know if it was like just their version of the random solo in a power metal concert, but it's probably one of the more interesting of the bonus tracks, but definitely is kind of a Roland solo piece, much like the Grabowski's Malm Suite would be a year later, but definitely has like those classic Roland guitar tones that you hear even it past this era of the band, but kind of a cool tune. I'm a little surprised that you hadn't heard it before. I think it was it was on it was only on the Japanese version of the When the Sinner single. So like,
and you're surprised I hadn't heard it?
I guess, yeah. I don't know. Maybe that was a weird thing to say, but it was, for whatever reason, it wasn't on the European version of the single. It is called Oriental Journey after all. So, but just interesting that it was only released in one area. It actually resurfaced on the Buried Treasure bonus disc that came with the Treasure Chest Greatest Hits release. I think that came out in like 2002, somewhere around that time. But interesting tune.
Yeah, and these are all so different. The next one, Cut in the Middle, has a gallop to it at least, which is something you really don't get to say much on this album. It's actually quite catchy, albeit kind of scat-like. Kind of underrated, really kind of thought that this might have been a better served on the album proper. I don't think it's a metal tune. It's definitely harder rock, but it's actually a pretty good song that I think it's probably the best of the B-sides.
Yeah, Marcus, this was like around the time that Marcus was like the master of the Helloween B-sides. I think it wasn't until like Rabbit Don't Come Easy that Marcus's songs would really start to become on the proper album. But there's a lot of Marcus gems out there. I remember talking about a couple of them in the Pink Bubbles discussion, but this is one of two songs that he wrote that ended up being B-sides. And yeah, I think this is kind of a neat tune. Again, it's a little bit offbeat compared to everything else, but catchy enough.
Yeah, I agree. I want to hear your thoughts on Introduction, which is basically just a comedy track.
I thought this was freaking. The first time I heard this, I thought this was absolutely hysterical. I'll let Mikey do the talking on this one. This comes from an interview that he did. He said, when I did Introduction, I actually wanted to create some kind of Spinal Tap-ish impact, like a German rock star who's lost track of reality. And also I wanted to take some shit out on some people I knew, which is more or less a private way to take it out on them. So it was basically fun. during that time, I was so unhappy with many things, and I was not behind the whole Helloween thing because I thought we were going in the wrong direction. And while being in that situation, I just wanted to have some fun.
Well said. I don't think I'm going to add anything to that, although I will say if you've never heard this, it's definitely a change of pace.
Yeah, it's funny because they take the song that comes next, "Get Me Out of Here," and he kind of changes the lyrics to it. It's really like a comedy sketch. It's really quite funny. I'll continue. I kind of want to read the rest of this quote just because I think it's really interesting. It says, "There's some bootleg videos you can watch from shows in Japan where I behave very odd, and I still played my stuff, but it was quite obvious that I wasn't with the thing or with the game, and this was merely aggression in between Kisk and me, in fronts being built inside the band and different camps that made the whole time very hard for everyone, especially for me in particular and Kisk as well. Then I tended to do a lot of stupid stuff to irritate him or anyone else, and that's how the introduction came about and the whole song, Get Me Out of Here. Funny thing is that Michael Kiske liked Get Me Out of Here so much that he said I should always write stuff like it, even for albums. And I said, yeah, well, that's taking it a little bit too far, maybe. And he said, why? And I said, because we simply can't do it, so let's close the subject, please. I mean, he may have had a point, but on the other hand, I'm quite happy that it's on the B-side. So
I actually like the song. I think it's like got an infectious melody to it.
Yeah, I think he's talking more about the introduction part of it, but
yeah.
It is a catchy tune. The lyrics are very goofy. It's just about a slob, basically. But I think that this quote is really like a window into what the chaos was with this band at the time.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, this is a fun little tune. Also, again, like not really a Helloween song, but just kind of, if Wyke had ever made a solo album, this is the kind of wackiness that I would have hoped to hear on something like that.
And then you get your money's worth, if nothing else, with Red Rocks and the Smell of Trees. This is over 10 minutes long for a B-side, and my only thoughts were like, am I listening to a Fish album or a Grateful Dead album? It's the one song that the entire band helped pen, and it's like this avant-garde, like, I don't know what the hell to say about this thing. What were they thinking with this?
I don't know. I'm kind of surprised it's not on the main Chameleon album because it would fit in with the rest of the insanity. But this is my least favorite Helloween song of all time, I think. There's just nothing about it is interesting to me. It's just this meandering, I never thought of it like a jam band kind of song, but I think you really hit the nail on the head there. I'm curious if it was completely improv, and that's why the entire band received credit. Like, I wonder if they just sat there and played something.
Right.
I guess that seems unusual considering the state of the band at the time. But man, this song does absolutely nothing for me. I just think it's a 10-minute snooze fest.
Yeah, it's a slog. I've got nothing else to say about that. It's just a really odd tune. And then there's Ain't Got Nothing, which has like this 50s rock vibe to it, in my opinion. It's almost like Elvis, the way they approached this song, with a touch of blue suede shoes thrown in, which makes sense because obviously they had played that in the past, and it's a cover that they would even play live. Just not something I need to hear. I'll leave it at that. It's fine. It's just not my thing. A scale of 1 to 10. What are you giving this album?
It's weird. I'm going to probably catch a lot of hell for this, but
Step out of hell and tell me what you think.
Yeah, I'm giving it a 7.75, and
wow,
that's probably as low as I could possibly go on a Helloween album. It probably will be the lowest rank that I give.
Wow,
Helloween album. I gave Pink Bubbles a 8.25, but I just really like the album on a whole, even though it doesn't make any sense as a Helloween album. I like the songs as individual parts, and I think the fact that I've actually kind of grown to tolerate Revolution now pushes it a little bit higher. But I'm just that much of a fan of the band that like even their worst album isn't really that bad to me. It's actually quite good, and there's a lot to enjoy from it. So I recognize the fact that my score is way higher than just about anybody else's, but that's just how much I love this band, and I just think this album is very unjustly maligned. I think it's justly maligned in certain instances, but to just write off an entire album because it doesn't fit a certain mold, I think kind of is just not how I want to approach it. And I think that stuff like this is what makes bands interesting, that they actually have stuff that's different. And, I don't know how much we really needed a Keeper of the Seven Keys parts 3 and 4. I have such a love for all of the different eras of Helloween and how different they are from one another. Well, whether it be the Kai Wells of Jericho era, the Keeper era, this era, I call the Uli Roland era, and everything that follows. There's just so much about this band and the history of this band. So I guess I'm being a little bit apologetic, but I also don't care. So yeah, 7.75. That's where I'm going. I expect that yours is going to be significantly lower, if by no other reason than by the fact that you had given Pink Bubbles Go Ape a 7.5, and I cannot see you even coming close to that on this one. So
there are a handful of songs that I enjoy, and there's a handful of songs that I just don't care about. This is a 5.0 for me. It's not bad. It's not the 3 that I probably would have given it, or the 2 I would have given it in 1999. It's actually better than that. But at the same time, this is not an album that I long to go back to. And I think that Pink Bubbles is markedly better. And so I give it a 5. I don't know if you call that average. I don't know if you call that a little below average, slightly less than passable, whatever. There's some good tracks on here, but by and large, I just think it's an album that, if I wanted this kind of stuff, I think it's the lack of collusion that really has me, that I have an issue with. The fact that when you just has no flow, no continuity, it's the kind of thing where if a song comes on shuffle and I heard it, I'd be like, this is cool. But when you listen to the whole package for 71 minutes, it goes on too long.
That's fair. And I'm sure a lot of people would agree. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that would rate it significantly even lower than that. So, that's cool. You gave the same, rating to the Monkey's Justice album, which, is like it's almost like the Monkees version of Chameleon. It's got a big white boring album art, and everybody wrote their own songs, and there's
no flow, so that's why I rate it the way I do. But
interesting parallelism there. But I don't know, man. I love Helloween. Like they can do no wrong. They can do no wrong in my eyes, and this is as wrong as it gets.
There you go. Well said. I just want to bring up 2 quick news items. Number 1, really good news out of the Pretty Maids camp. They're getting back together and playing shows in 2024. There is still hope that I will get to see this band live for a second time. It is nice to hear that they are going back on the road together, and they announced a number of festival dates. I know you're happy about that as well.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to lead to me end up, actually getting to see them live, but just hearing that, I didn't realize that Ronnie Atkins and Ken Hammer, who've basically been the 2, backbones of this band going back to the early 80s, had a falling out. And I don't know if it had anything to do with, Ronnie's health, but it sounds like they've kind of made peace with each other and made amends. And I didn't even realize there were problems. I just assumed that the band was kind of on a hiatus due to Ronnie's health. But it's great to hear that they're going to be, getting back to together again and playing again. And I can only hope that somehow they end up back in the States and I could see them, one more time before, if this is, towards the end of their existence. They've turned into like a band that I really, really enjoy. And so I really hope that, there's more to come from them. Hopefully another album. It's been quite a few years. It's been 4 years since their last full-length album, so great news. It's just good to hear, and I hope that Ronnie continues to do well.
Yeah, and you know, it's a pleasant surprise because I thought that they were done. I really did, but it's just good news all around from that camp. And you know, we sat in our group chat last night, and the subject of Dream Theater came up, and I had a prognostication, but I swear I had no idea that this thing was going to get announced today.
I know, we're going to start calling you the metal Punxsutawney Phil.
Yeah. We're talking about Dream Theater, and I said I would be shocked if Mike Portnoy did not rejoin this band again. And we got an announcement about 12 hours later that Mike Portnoy is back as the drummer for Dream Theater. I shit you not. You can't make it up. I did say it. You're my witness. But Mike Portnoy back in Dream Theater. They're going to hit the road, and they're going to record another album. Some rumors that this might be the last album and last tour. I don't know if that's true. But if that is in fact true, despite your disdain for one Mr. Labrie on lead vocals, I think that it's time to go see them one last time.
Yeah, I think in this case, absolutely. Although I will say the comment of the day went to my friend Asher, who wrote, I wish they would announce that they were bringing back Charlie Dominici. So
Well said.
Pretty much hit the nail on the head about how I feel about it. But, you know, it's something to be said for loyalty, I suppose. I just think that, and we talked about this at length in our group chat, but I do think that when you have some of the greatest musicians at each of their instruments and just the subpar live vocalist, it really kind of takes away from just this. It's like four virtuosos and then the guy who's just kind of just out there. You know, it's I don't know. He's not bad. He just can't do what he used to be able to do. And we want to hear songs that Dream Theater has played over the years. And I don't know. It's to be completely honest with you, like I've kind of been checked out on Dream Theater since Train of Thought came out. So
yeah, it was only 20 years ago. So that's good. But yeah, I'm intrigued. I'm interested, and I'll definitely go see them on tour again. I'm just curious. I think they're going to play some pretty big rooms, so that will be interesting. And speaking of interesting, we go from Chameleon in 1993 to our next album, which is a request from one of our Patreon members, Nick, a good dear friend of ours, to 1994. And a band that I've just never paid any attention to. I'm familiar with a lot of the radio songs, but this band just never paid any attention to it, and I need to spend some real time with this album before we discuss it. The band is Nine Inch Nails. The album is The Downward Spiral, which came out in March of 1994. I knew a couple of tracks off this album, but by and large, a lot of this was new to me. I only listened to it once so far, and I just need to spend a lot more time with this one.
Yeah, I haven't listened to it at all yet, and I know at least two songs. We'll see if I recognize more than two. But yeah, this is, I think, very interesting and definitely a major milestone in hard rock / heavy metal. This was a really interesting album because I remember hearing Closer on the radio, you know, right in between your Green Days and your Weezers and your Stone Temple Pilots. And so I always kind of lumped them into the alternative, you know, rock area. But years later, hearing more and more of their stuff, it's clear that they really don't actually fit. I mean, there is definitely an alternative sense to it, but this is in an industrial rock, industrial metal situation all the way. So interesting choice. I guess we can kind of lump it in with our October choices, just really kind of some off the beaten path type stuff. The weirdest Helloween album of all time, a Monkees album, a video game cover album, a band Grim Reaper that neither of us ever really listened to. I mean, it's been a fun ride. And I guess we'll wrap things up with Nick's request of Nine Inch Nails. I'm looking forward to it. This is something I'm just really not that knowledgeable in. So it'll be an education, if nothing else.
As we march on towards the end of the year in our year of review episode, which we always look forward to. But thanks to everyone for listening. Give us a like and a follow, and consider joining the Patreon if you like what you hear. It does really help support the show. Chris, this has been fun. I knew we would do it eventually. No better time than the present. So I'm glad we got to cover this. I'm glad that I got to really spend some time with this album. And I'm going to go listen to some Nine Inch Nails. So enjoy the rest of the week, my friend, and I will talk to you sooner rather than later.
And our next Helloween episode will be about Master of the Rings. Date to be determined, but I think you'll be able to, you got probably your two least favorites out of the way, so we can focus on some more bright spots, at least the general consensus being, I'm looking forward to talking about more of the Helloween albums, and like I've said before, I hope that by the time it's all said and done, we'll have talked about all of their albums, but it's going to take a few more years before we get there.
No doubt. Good choice, my friend. I will talk to you soon.
All right, take care, buddy.
Feelings come and go.